Hello everyone, this is lesson 2 in Simple Cut software, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make multiple copies of the file for your cutting machine. So I'm going to click on my Simple Cut software icon and open up the software, and I'm going to open an existing file, and this is the file that we completed in lesson 1. And I'm going to click on the radio button for open existing, and I'm going to choose star class sample and then click on finish. That is going to bring up the star, and if you look over on the right hand side in your object properties dialog box, you are not going to see any information. And you have to think, well, why? And I will tell you, because your star hasn't been selected. So we do have to click on the star to get our bounding box around it, and you will see that the options in the Object Properties dialog box will appear. Now, around your star is your bounding box with the handles, and you have handles at all 4 corners and in the middle of the sides. And I'm going to use the scroll wheel on my mouse just to zoom out a little bit. And if I hover over one of the corners, I'm going to see a double arrow. Now you have to be careful because there are a couple of different icons you're going to see. One is the curved arrow, and one is the 4 arrow icon. And I want you to choose the double arrow, and we're going to resize this design. And you're probably familiar with this method already, and that's great. So we'll just click and hold our left mouse button and drag it down to resize our design. Now you remember in lesson 1 we resized our design using our tool options up here, and that's okay. This is just another way to resize your design. Now I'm not being very exact when I use the handles, and I don't need to be. This is just a video for you to view at home as a reminder of what to do. So I'm going to use that size, and the next thing I'm going to want to do is move that design. So I have my 4 arrow icon highlighted. I'm going to click and hold my left mouse button and bring it up to the upper left hand corner of the mat. That's just where I want it to be placed. If I hover over the upper right hand corner and get the curved arrow, I can use this icon. If I press and hold my left mouse button, I can rotate my design. Okay? So I will put it back into position, and you have just learned 3 new tools. You can use your double arrow to resize. You can use the 4 arrow icon, click and hold to move, or you can use that curved arrow, clicking and holding your left mouse button to rotate your design. The next thing we want to do is make multiple copies of our design. Let's say I want 4 stars to send to my cutter. Well, I'm going to do that via copy and paste because I think that most of you are probably familiar with those icons. And believe me, familiarity just makes you feel very good. There is another way to do the multiple copies. You'll have to excuse my cats, they're trying to come in the room. There are other ways to do multiple copies, but I think that copy and paste for now is the way to go, because let's keep things simple, because this is Simple Cut. And I'll show you that in a future video segment. I'm going to make sure that my design is selected with the bounding box, and then I'm going to click on copy. And then I'm going to click on paste. Now you will see over here in the sequence manager that there are 2 tiles for 2 stars. I'm going to click on paste 2 more times because I want 4 stars, and I will see those 4 stars in my sequence manager. But if you look in the working area, you're not seeing 4 stars because you have to realize that they're all stacked on top of each other, and we have to peel them off. So let's get that 4 arrow icon. I'm going to click and hold my mouse button and just start moving those copies over to the right. And I will just put them into place. Alright, so I have my 4 copies. Now what I want to do, and I'm going to show you a technique that I use at home, and again there are multiple ways to do the same thing, but this is the method that I prefer to send multiple cuts of the same object to my cutting machine. I'm going to select this icon right here, rectangle selection tool, and I'm going to click and hold my left mouse button to draw a bounding box around all 4 stars. And I'm going to do that right here, and the bounding box now has all 4 stars. And then I'm going to hover in my bounding box, but I want to make sure that I'm not getting one of the other symbols that I talked about. I just want my mouse to be an arrow, and I'm going to press the right mouse button, and a group of options will come up in a menu, and I want to select Combine. When I choose Combine, all 4 of the tiles have now been condensed into one, so all 4 of my stars are on one tile. This is the method that I prefer to use to send my multiple copies to my cutting machine, and I'll tell you why. Because I had problems doing it with the different tile. And so this is the way that I recommend. Again, there are other ways to accomplish the same task. This is just one. Once you have combined your stars, you're going to want to go into Cutter Presets, and I click on my Cutter Preset button, and I want to choose the medium that I am using, and I want to use fabric back with fusible webbing. So I'll click on that option, and once I have done that, it's going to tell me my cutter speed, cutter pressure, and cutter passes. Those are set in the software. I'm going to have to make sure that my blade depth is set at 4.0 and I'm using my yellow blade. These are the 2 things that I have to check on my cutter. So your bounding box and all 4 stars is selected. I am now going to go into my file menu, and I'm going to export to my cutters. And I'm going to choose the cutter that I'm using, whether it's a 12 or 15, or if you're using a different type of cutter, you can choose that if the option is available, and click on Connect. I am getting an error because I had to disconnect from my cutter for now. I'm just going to click on OK, and it will bring up the Export to Cutter box. Things that I want you to look at always before you actually do a trace or a test or a cut, and that would be your point of origin markers. Now my point of origin is at the upper left hand corner. Always check out your point of origin, because this is going to correspond with the upper left edge of the fabric on your mat. You want to make sure it's a little bit into the left, a little bit down from the top edge of your fabric, and this would be your point of origin. Now your point of origin could be the center, it could be any one of these plus signs, but for me, a lot of the times it is in the upper left hand corner, and you have to decide where that is and pay attention to where the laser is on your cutting machine. Once your point of origin is where you want it to be, you'll always want to do a trace. Obviously, I'm not hooked up now, so these options are grayed out, so I can't do them, but we'll talk about them. We want to do a trace to make sure that everything's going to be cut on our fabric. If we're going to do a test, that option would be right there, and I highly recommend doing a test until you become very familiar with your cutter and the settings, and then we would do a sample cut, or hopefully what will be what we're going to use, not necessarily a sample. But I always encourage you to do samples when you're starting out with your cutter, because making mistakes is a great way to learn. Believe me, I made plenty of them. All right, so I'm going to close out this dialog box, because at this point in our Cutter Club class, we are actually going to work with the hands-on portion. We are going to send this to our cutter. We're going to prep our fabric, prep our mats, and I look forward to seeing you in video lesson number 3 in Simple Cut. So for now, I'm going to end this video, and we are going to go to the hands-on portion of this class. Please refer back to this video if you're at home and you forget what I have talked about. All right, everybody, happy cutting.